For centuries, they were the empire's pride, an army forged in discipline, loyalty, and faith. The Janissaries. Once their march shook the earth. Once their name alone made kings tremble. But as the centuries passed, those same soldiers who built the empire would also bring it to its knees. This is the story of shadows and steel, the rise and fall of the empire's most powerful weapon. It began as a system called Devshirme, the child levy. From the far corners of the Balkans, Christian boys were chosen for service to the Sultan. Taken from their homes, converted to Islam, and trained from youth, they became Janissaries, the new soldiers of God and the Sultan. They were forbidden to marry, to trade, or to hold property. Their only loyalty was to the empire. Trained in the arts of war, strategy, and faith, they were the world's first standing army, professional soldiers, unmatched in discipline. Their unity made them unstoppable. At the Siege of Constantinople, their chants thundered across the battlefield, "Allah! Allah!" and the city fell. Their blades carried the empire from the Balkans to Arabia. But as decades turned into centuries, something changed. Power, like iron, can rust. The Janissaries, once ascetic warriors, began to taste luxury. They married, traded, and entered politics. They gained influence and lost purpose. They became a political force capable of overthrowing sultans. If a ruler tried to reform them, they rebelled. If a vizier displeased them, they burned the city. Istanbul lived in fear of the very army sworn to protect it. In 1622, their power reached a dark peak. Sultan Osman II, young and ambitious, sought to modernize the army and free it from corruption. But his dream cost him his life. The Janissaries revolted, dragged him through the streets, and murdered him, the first regicide in Ottoman history. From that day, every sultan knew the sword that protected the throne could also destroy it. The 17th and 18th centuries were marked by rebellion after rebellion. The Janissaries demanded gold, privilege, and power. Viziers struggled to control them, and the empire's heart began to crack under their boots. Reformers tried to restore the old discipline. They rebuilt armies, modernized tactics, and imported European technologies. But every attempt was met with resistance. To the Janissaries, reform meant betrayal of tradition. Meanwhile, the world beyond the empire was changing fast. Europe was industrializing, colonizing, inventing, and the Ottomans were falling behind. The empire that had once conquered with swords now found itself defending with memories. By the early 1800s, a new generation of reformers emerged. They called their vision the Tanzimat, reorganization. They dreamed of modern schools, fair taxes, new armies, and equality for all citizens, regardless of religion. It was a time of optimism and conflict. The empire adopted European laws, built railways, printed newspapers, and sent scholars abroad. The Ottoman world began to blend East and West, tradition and progress, faith and reason. But one shadow still lingered: the Janissaries. They stood against the tide of change, clinging to their privileges, their barracks, their old glory. And so the Sultan made his decision. The old guard would fall. In 1826, Sultan Mahmud II acted. With silence and cunning, he planned the unthinkable. One summer morning, the Janissaries were summoned to drill, but instead of weapons, they found cannons aimed at their barracks. As the Sultan's modern army opened fire, centuries of rebellion ended in flame. The Janissaries, once the empire's mightiest warriors, were annihilated in what history remembers as the auspicious incident. When the smoke cleared, Istanbul was silent. The empire was free, but its old heart had stopped beating. Mahmud II and his successors pushed forward. Feudal lords were curbed. Western-style ministries emerged. Newspapers printed debates on science, progress, and liberty. The fez replaced the turban, a symbol of a modern Ottoman identity. But modernization was not without pain. Factories rose where mosques once stood. Scholars clashed with reformers. And in the distant provinces, new powers, like Egypt under Muhammad Ali, challenged the Sultan's rule. Even as the empire modernized, its territory crumbled. Greece broke free. Serbia rose. European powers, hungry for land, circled like vultures. The empire was learning too late that steel and reform could not rebuild a crumbling soul. The 19th century was a storm. From the Crimean War to the Balkan uprisings, the Ottomans fought to hold on to what was left. Each victory came with a cost, and each loss took another piece of the empire's heart. New technologies like rifles and railroads arrived, but so did nationalism. Peoples once loyal to the Sultan now dreamed of their own flags, their own freedom. The empire, once a mosaic of unity, began to fracture into countless pieces of identity. In 1908, a movement of young officers rose, the Young Turks. They demanded a constitution, an end to corruption, and a revival of Ottoman power. For a brief moment, hope returned. But the empire was too fragile. The Balkan Wars, World War I, and internal strife shattered its last defenses. By 1918, the Ottoman flag was torn. The Allies occupied Istanbul. The empire that had ruled 3 continents for 600 years was no more. The last sultan, Mehmed VI, left the palace quietly, a man without a throne, a shadow of his ancestors. As his ship sailed into exile, the Bosporus wept in silence. From the ashes of the empire rose a new nation, the Republic of Turkey, led by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. The Ottoman age ended, but its legacy became the foundation for a modern, secular state. Ataturk abolished the caliphate, reformed education, and looked to the future. But even he carried the weight of Ottoman memory, the dreams, triumphs, and tragedies of 6 centuries. The empire of shadows and steel had fallen, but its echoes still ring in every minaret, every marketplace, every heartbeat of Istanbul. Empires are not immortal. They live, they fight, they fade. But the Ottoman Empire was more than a kingdom. It was a civilization that shaped continents, languages, art, and faith. Its story is not one of simple rise and fall. It is a mirror of humanity itself. Ambition and mercy, faith and doubt, glory and decay. The Ottomans taught the world that steel can build empires, but only hearts and ideas can keep them alive. And so the story ends, not in defeat, but in transformation. From the empire of shadows and steel to the light of a new dawn.